Let's jump right into this. So the opener of Season 6 had a few things going on. There was Starlight Glimmer and her friendship lesson meeting an old friend. There were even things about Crystal Empire and the Frozen North. But let's all be honest. One of the very most interesting parts of the episode was this. Alicorn babies. Mainly because of this quote right here.
The birth of an Alicorn is something Equestria has never seen.
It is beyond even our understanding.
This is the biggest point in the entire episode, and it really says a lot. All of us before now have probably figured that Luna and Celestia had grown up with their wings, that they were born as little baby Alicorns, and maybe even their mother and father were Alicorns at birth as well. I know that there was that logic behind it that still existed in those cases though, where, people would make Alicorn OCs and they would say, no, you can't have an Alicorn OC, Alicorn wings need to be earned, they can't just be born with Alicorn wings. But I'd say that even most of the people who believed that still believe that Luna and Celestia were exceptions to that rule. Because, they're kind of seen as more like goddesses. I mean, geez, ponies even use Celestia's name in vain.
Wait, Celestia!
But it looks like now we're starting to realize throughout the series that they really are just princesses. They're ponies with very powerful magic, but are by no means godlike. They seem pretty dang close. I mean, they can move the sun and the moon. In fact, that might have been the point from the beginning of the series. But at the very same time, maybe the magic that can move the sun and the moon isn't necessarily as impressive as we figured it was. Although that does pose a really interesting question. The sun and the moon were supposedly raised by Celestia and Luna. But if they weren't born as Alicorns, do we have to assume then that maybe somebody else had done it before them? I mean, I think this was probably obvious to most of the fandom. After all, everybody always draws Luna and Celestia as fillies, and naturally fillies probably can't move the sun and moon by themselves. But thinking that far back, there are so many headcanons that can arise from this. I mean, theoretically, the sun and the moon could have moved once on their own. But maybe the land was cursed one day or something, and it was left in the ponies' power to do so. Maybe the whole reason why Luna and Celestia even had to raise the sun in the first place was because a curse was put on Equestria, the entire Earth, for that matter, and basically the sun and the moon stopped working without the power of magic. So the most powerful ponies in the land, Alicorns, had to take up that spot using their magic. Because if they didn't, obviously it would either be day all the time or night all the time, and, well, either one could be potentially dangerous in one way or another. In fact, you could say that the places that weren't affected by that curse are the places that function normally. Places like the Everfree Forest, or maybe even places like the Frozen North. Now, naturally, the weather of the Frozen North and the, strange weirdness of the Everfree Forest are both things that aren't natural in our world. But if Equestria is a magical land to begin with, then who's to say that the weather can't be a bit magical as well? It would make a lot of sense to say that the weather and everything else worked on its own normally, before the land was cursed? Or, it doesn't have to be a curse, but I'm just saying that at some point, the ponies obviously had to start doing something. Just the same way as we can trace our Earth back to practically nothing, which is the one point that all scientists and religious activists can agree on, then wouldn't it also make sense that there was a time when Equestria didn't exist? Wouldn't it make sense that there was a time that ponies didn't exist? And how on earth could ponies live and survive if it was always day or always night? I mean, sure, the magic obviously had to come from somewhere and everything else, but are we just supposed to assume that Equestria came into being, and eventually, when ponies evolved, or, poofed into existence, whatever you want to say, enough to figure out how to use their magic, that they just randomly started moving around the moon and the sun and figuring, oh, well, this works a lot better than one or the other? I just think it makes a lot more sense to think that the moon and the sun once moved on their own, and they don't anymore. Back to the idea of Alicorns, though. In the beginning of this video, I kept on saying that we know now that nobody has been born with Alicorn wings. But notice how I kept on saying Alicorn wings and not Alicorn horn? Rarity said specifically, but I thought that Alicorn wings had to be earned by accomplishing some kind of princess-worthy deed. Notice how she said Alicorn wings.
But I thought Alicorn wings had to be earned by accomplishing some great princess-worthy deed.
This is probably just kind of nitpicking, because just like I was doing earlier without even knowing it, the wings are the big deal. At least for most of us, because we know for a fact that Twilight turned into an Alicorn, and all we could think of was wings, 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 wings. And it's safe to assume that Rarity and her friends all have the wings emphasized in their minds too because of their friend's transformation. So there's a good possibility that it doesn't mean anything, and that ponies could be given wings or a horn depending on whether they were a unicorn or Pegasus to begin with. Or maybe even both if they started out as an Earth pony. But on the off chance that that isn't true, does this mean that only unicorns can become Alicorns? Why unicorns? If it is true that unicorns are the only ones that can become Alicorns, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, then there has to be some reason behind it, right? Is it just a tradition passed down by the ponies way before? Or does it have something to do with the fact that unicorns already have more magical power, at least a way to harness it, and they're afraid of giving a unicorn horn to a Pegasus? After all, flying and crashing is a lot less dangerous than magic spasms. And as far as Earth ponies go, they would experience both of those problems, and that would be twice as dangerous. So is it really because they feel like unicorns have more of the power to handle it? Or perhaps it's just required. Maybe the kind of magic that can give Alicorn wings really does only respond to unicorns. Unicorns might have higher concentrated magic levels or something because they're the ones that can use it. And I would say that it might have something to do with the fact that unicorns are the only ones that have magic, but that doesn't exactly make sense ever since Tyrek. He already proved that he could take magic from just about any pony. Honestly, if this is true, there could be a number of reasons for it, so feel free to come up with your own speculations. Now back to the very beginning. An Alicorn baby is something that Equestria has never seen. Now we could just nitpick this and say that Equestria doesn't necessarily mean the whole Earth. It just means that part of the Earth, the land of Equestria. Are we to say that the land where the griffins reside and where the dragons reside and all these other places are outside of Equestria? The princesses of Equestria seem to be just that, princesses of Equestria. They greeted the leaders of the other lands just as though they were equal, even though Celestia and Luna are so important that they raised the sun and the moon. So could we say then, theoretically, that an Alicorn may have been born outside of Equestria and had escaped the knowledge of Celestia and Luna? Or are we to assume that ponies reside in Equestria and anywhere outside is usually other creatures, and thus the only place where an Alicorn would be born is in Equestria? You know, unless there was this tiny pony family camping out on the other side of the Earth because they got lost or something. Personally, I like the theory that Princess Flurry Heart is the first Alicorn to ever have known to be born in the history of the whole entire world. Now, with this headcanon, there could be Alicorns that were born secretly, but in general, Princess Flurry Heart would be the very first Alicorn known to be born. Still, this can easily vary from person to person. Everybody's going to have their own headcanons about it. She's the first one to be born in Equestria, but there might be other Alicorns born outside of Equestria, is what Celestia was trying to say. This is entirely valid as well. I mean, technically none of us know. But what does all of this mean for the fandom? Celestia, with one sentence, completely and utterly destroyed every single Alicorn OC that was said in their stories to be born in Equestria, with their Alicorn wings and horn, of course. So unless one of those Alicorn OCs has a story that says they were, say, born in secret, for example, the creators of these OCs have, as far as I can figure, two options. Option 1, they say that their OC isn't existing within the canon of My Little Pony, but rather within their own alternate reality side, slightly different headcanon. Or option 2, they tweak their OC to fit this canon. This could be by, as I said, having their OC be born in secret, or having their OC legitimately have earned their wings and have become royalty, or having their wings earned in secret, and thus, well, you know, not being royalty but still being an Alicorn, and then also making up some kind of reason why people wouldn't think it's strange that they aren't royalty and yet they're an Alicorn, or any weird tweaked combination of anything that I just said. The final option being pick one of the three races and just stop the Alicornhood altogether. But people will most likely choose one of the first two options rather than that one. Anyway, that about wraps it up. Thank you, Princess Flurry Heart, for bringing about all of these interesting theories. If you guys have anything to say or have to add any of your own theories into the mix, go ahead and comment. I'm really interested. Let's all theorize together and talk about our headcanons. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to get another video up soon.